In 1993, a concept car at the Tokyo Motor Show got a reaction Suzuki misread as demand. Somewhere in the basement of Suzuki's marketing department, a grown adult signed off on a two-seat SUV with a removable roof, a boot lid shaped like a car boot, and absolutely nowhere to put a dog. Suzuki built it because the crowd at the Tokyo Motor Show had laughed and pointed and taken photographs, and somebody mistook that for demand. Roughly 7,000 people worldwide bought one. That's the trap. A concept car, sometimes called a dream car or a show car, exists to get you to walk toward a stand at a motor show. It doesn't have to work, doesn't have to pass a crash test, doesn't have to carry a child seat, and doesn't have to make money. So what happens when a company gets brave or reckless and builds the thing for real? Which show cars actually made it to a showroom floor? And why did the same public that had been screaming for them refuse to spend a single penny? Let's start with that Suzuki, because it's the purest example of the disease. The X-90 first appeared as a show car at Tokyo in 1993, and Suzuki put it into production in 1995 on the bones of the Vitara. That means a proper ladder frame, low-range gearing, and the option of four-wheel drive, all underneath a body with two seats, a separate notchback boot, and removable T-top roof panels you had to store somewhere. The engine was a 1.6-liter 4, making around 95 horsepower, which on a good day and a downhill stretch got you to 60 in about 12 seconds. The problem wasn't that it was bad to drive. The problem was that it answered a question nobody had asked. If you wanted to go off-road, you bought the Vitara with doors and seats and a roof. If you wanted a small convertible, you bought a Mazda MX-5 Miata for similar money and got twice the fun. Suzuki pulled the plug after about 2 years. Today, it's a cult object precisely because so few were sold, which is the automotive equivalent of becoming famous after you've died. Our next flop failed for the opposite reason. It was genuinely brilliant, and that turned out not to matter. Honda showed the VV concept in 1997 and put the first generation Insight on sale in 1999, and if you're keeping score, that made it the first hybrid sold in the United States, beating the Prius there by roughly 6 months. The engineering was ferocious. An aluminium body structure, plastic panels, covered rear wheels, a tapered tail, and a drag coefficient of about 0.25, which was slipperier than most supercars of the era. The engine was a 1-liter 3-cylinder, helped along by a thin electric motor sandwiched against the flywheel, a system Honda called Integrated Motor Assist. The whole car weighed around 1,850 pounds. It also had 2 seats, no rear bench, a boot the size of a gym bag, and a shape that made it look like a fish being squeezed. Honda reportedly sold around 17,000 of them worldwide across 7 years. Toyota, meanwhile, sold the Prius, which looked like a normal car, seated 5, and asked absolutely nothing of your dignity. Honda built the better engineering exercise, and Toyota built the better product, and the market has never once rewarded the former over the latter. This same lesson was about to be learned in Detroit at enormous expense 3 separate times. In January 1993, Chrysler rolled a purple hot rod onto its stand at the Detroit Auto Show. The Prowler concept had exposed front wheels on cantilevered arms, an aluminium-intensive structure, and a stance that made everything around it look apologetic. The crowd reaction was, by all accounts, hysterical. It's worth remembering that just 2 years earlier, Chrysler had scored a genuine concept-to-production triumph with the Dodge Viper, a car that had debuted at Detroit in 1989 and actually delivered on its promise. The Prowler's team presumably felt they could repeat that trick. Chrysler put it into production for 1997. Here's where it goes wrong. A hot rod is defined by an enormous engine and a manual gearbox. The Prowler got a 3.5-liter V6, making around 214 horsepower, later stretched to roughly 253, and a 4-speed automatic with a manual shift gate. There was no V8 option, because the aluminium front structure and the packaging around those exposed wheels reportedly wouldn't accept one. So you had a car that looked like it should be idling menacingly outside a diner, and it made the noise of a well-maintained minivan. The boot was so nearly non-existent that Chrysler sold a color-matched trailer as an accessory, which is a remarkable admission to put in a brochure. Total production came to somewhere around 11,700 cars over 5 years, and Chrysler pulled it in 2002. The people who wanted a hot rod already knew how to build one, and they weren't going to pay dealer prices for a 6-cylinder impression of one. Chevrolet watched all of this happen and decided the real problem was that the Prowler wasn't also a pickup. The SSR concept appeared in Detroit in 2000 and reached production in 2003 as a retractable hardtop convertible pickup truck riding on a shortened version of the Trailblazer platform. Read that sentence again, because every single word of it is doing damage. The folding steel roof was genuinely clever and genuinely heavy. The finished car weighed roughly 4,760 pounds, which is close to a contemporary Range Rover, and the first cars got a 5.3-liter V8 with around 300 horsepower. 60 took about 7.5 seconds in a vehicle that looked like it should do it in 5. It launched at around $42,000, which in 2003 bought you a very serious BMW. For 2005, Chevrolet fitted the 6.0-liter LS2 with roughly 390 horsepower and offered a 6-speed manual, which fixed the performance complaint entirely and fixed the sales problem not at all. Chevrolet built somewhere in the region of 24,000 across 4 model years and killed it in 2006. Nobody could work out whether they were buying a truck, a cruiser, or a joke, and the price meant getting it wrong was expensive. But the most painful American example of this is the one that briefly looked like a triumph. Ford showed a Thunderbird concept at Detroit in 1999, and the reaction was extraordinary. It took the 1955 car's cues, the porthole roof detail, the hooded headlights, the egg crate grille, and wrapped them around modern proportions. Production began for the 2002 model year using the DEW 98 platform shared with the Lincoln LS and the Jaguar S-Type, meaning the Thunderbird, a Lincoln executive saloon, and a Coventry-built Jaguar were essentially structural cousins, which tells you something about Ford's empire at the time. The engine was a 3.9-liter V8, making around 252 horsepower through a 5-speed automatic. Motor Trend named it Car of the Year for 2002. Dealers were reportedly getting premiums over list price. Ford had done it. Then, the second year happened. Ford had planned on something like 25,000 cars a year, and the initial rush had eaten most of the buyers who cared. The car itself was soft, heavy, at roughly 3,780 pounds, and rode on the same underpinnings as a mid-size executive saloon, which is exactly what it drove like. It wasn't fast enough for anyone who wanted a sports car, and it was too compromised for anyone who wanted a Lincoln. Ford managed roughly 68,000 over 4 model years, and stopped in 2005. Retro nostalgia turned out to be a 1-year fashion, and Ford had signed up for a 5-year product cycle. Our next one is European, and it's the bravest of the lot. Renault put the Avantime on sale in 2001, having shown it as a concept at Geneva in 1999. And the pitch was a two-door, four-seat, pillarless coupe built on the underpinnings of the S-Space minivan. It was, in Renault's own words, a coupéspace. The doors were the good bit and the fatal bit at once, because to open a door that long in a normal parking space, Matra engineered a double-hinge mechanism that swung the door outward and then forward. All the side glass and the roof panel could drop away together, leaving you sitting in something like a glass gazebo. The Avantime was designed by Patrick Lequemont's team and built by Matra at Romorantin, and it was reportedly Matra's own idea pitched to Renault rather than the other way around. Renault sold somewhere around 8,500 of them. Production ended in 2003. Matra stopped building cars entirely, and the site that had produced the Espace for years went quiet. Renault also had the Velsatis on sale at the same time, a large hatchback executive car aimed at the same buyer who didn't exist. The exact commercial numbers depend on which source you believe, but nobody has ever pretended the Avantime made money. Which brings us to the one that lost the most, and did it with the longest assembly line in the history of the industry. Cadillac's problem in the mid-80s was the Mercedes SL, which was sitting in every affluent American driveway and printing money for Stuttgart. So Cadillac commissioned Pininfarina in Turin to design and build the body of a two-seat luxury convertible, and the Allanté went on sale in 1987. Here's the part that never stops being funny. The floor pans were pressed in the United States and shipped to Italy. Pininfarina built and trimmed the bodies. The finished bodies were then loaded, reportedly 56 at a time, into specially modified Boeing 747 freighters and flown back to Hamtramck, Michigan for final assembly. Cadillac's own marketing bragged about it, calling it a 3,300-mile assembly line on the apparent theory that describing your logistics as a transatlantic air freight operation would read as luxury rather than as a warning. The car itself launched at around $54,000, which made it the most expensive Cadillac by a wide margin and put it right on top of the Mercedes it was chasing. And for that money, you got a 4.1-liter V8 with roughly 170 horsepower driving the front wheels. The SL was rear drive, better built, and came with a badge nobody had to explain. Early Allantés also reportedly leaked and had a removable hardtop so heavy that Cadillac supplied instructions involving two people. Cadillac kept fixing it. The engine grew to 4.5 liters. Then, for the final 1993 model year, the Allanté received the brand-new 4.6-liter Northstar V8 with around 295 horsepower, along with revised suspension and a proper speed-dependent damping system. By every account, it had finally become the car it should have been in 1987. Cadillac then cancelled it, because total production over 7 years came to roughly 21,000 units against a plan of several thousand a year. The very best Allanté is the one they built while switching the lights off. So what actually connects these? Not bad engineering. The Insight was a masterpiece. The Avantime's doors still make modern car design look timid, and the last Allanté was a genuinely good car. What connects them is that a motor show crowd costs nothing to join. Standing on a carpeted stand in Geneva saying, "Somebody should build that," is free. Walking into a dealership 2 years later, financing a 2-seat pickup with a folding roof, and explaining it to your family is not free. And that's where every one of these cars died. The odd footnote is that the same era produced the Chrysler PT Cruiser, which came from a concept, looked far stranger than most of this list, and sold well over 1 million copies because it was secretly a practical small car with a big boot and a folding rear seat. The weird shape was free. The compromise was what killed everything else. So which of these deserved better? I'll defend the Avantime until the day I die, and I'd take the 1993 Allanté over any Mercedes SL of that year, purely out of spite. But tell me I'm wrong in the comments. And more importantly, should I cover more concept car disasters, or the ones that actually worked, and why? Let me know down below, and remember to subscribe and hit like if you enjoyed this video.